Let me tell you something strange about people who find happiness in simple things. We live in a world that measures joy by its price tag, its size, its ability to impress strangers on a screen. Maybe you're one of them, the ones who feel more alive watching rain than scrolling through highlight reels. And maybe no one ever explained why that matters, or why it feels like swimming against a current no one else seems to notice. The world calls this settling, lack of ambition, a quiet resignation to mediocrity, as if finding peace in a warm cup of coffee or the weight of a book in your hands means you've given up on something bigger. But what if it's the opposite? What if seeking happiness in simple things isn't about lowering your standards, but about raising your consciousness? What if it's a form of emotional clarity the rest of the world is too distracted to notice, a kind of freedom that doesn't need permission or an audience to exist? There's a particular kind of wisdom in this. Not the wisdom that comes from books or degrees, but the kind that emerges when you stop chasing and start noticing. When you realize that joy doesn't have to be earned or announced, that satisfaction doesn't require witnesses. These people have discovered something radical, that happiness isn't hiding at the end of some grand achievement or expensive experience. It's been here all along, in the texture of ordinary moments, waiting to be felt instead of photographed. If you want to understand what you feel without labels, and have language to explain yourself without justifying who you are, stay with me. Here we don't turn psychology into diagnosis. We translate it into relief, into recognition, into the quiet comfort of knowing you're not broken for finding beauty where others see nothing at all. The world has convinced us that happiness should be loud, that it should come with notifications, likes, stories that expire in 24 hours but somehow define our worth. We've been taught that presence means visibility, that if joy isn't shared, it somehow counts less, matters less, exists less. But maybe the real noise isn't the silence you choose. It's the constant demand to perform your contentment for strangers who'll scroll past it in 3 seconds. This is what psychologists call hedonic adaptation. The treadmill of always needing more, bigger, louder to feel the same spark. Our brains are wired to chase novelty, to believe that the next thing will finally be enough. But people who find happiness in simple things have somehow stepped off that treadmill. They've discovered what researchers call intrinsic satisfaction, the ability to generate contentment from within, independent of external validation or material accumulation. They don't need the world to applaud their joy, because the joy itself is the point. There's a conflict here, though, a quiet war between how you actually feel and how you're supposed to feel. When everyone around you is chasing the next experience, the next purchase, the next dopamine hit of social approval, choosing simplicity can feel like rebellion, or worse, like failure. Like you're not trying hard enough, not wanting enough, not living up to some invisible standard of what a full life should look like. The pressure whispers that you should want more, that contentment is just complacency wearing a peaceful mask. But here's what that pressure doesn't understand. Finding happiness in simple things isn't about wanting less. It's about perceiving more. It's about having the attention span and emotional bandwidth to notice what most people rush past. The way light changes through a window, the specific comfort of your favorite corner of the couch, the taste of bread you made with your own hands. These aren't small things. They're enormous when you're actually present for them. Psychologists call this capacity for present moment awareness, this ability to extract profound satisfaction from ordinary experience. It's related to what researchers describe as savoring, the deliberate appreciation of positive experiences, the practice of being fully there for your own life instead of always looking ahead to the next thing. In other words, it's knowing how to exist inside your moments instead of constantly trying to escape them or upgrade them or prove them to someone else. Think about it this way. Most people experience their lives like they're watching a movie at double speed, always rushing toward the plot points, the big moments, the scenes they think matter. But people who find happiness in simple things have slowed down the playback. They're noticing the cinematography, the small gestures, the quiet scenes between the action. They're watching their lives at the speed of actual living. That's not simplicity, that's sophistication. That's emotional intelligence that doesn't need to announce itself. This is connected to what psychologists call an internal locus of control, when your sense of worth and well-being comes from inside rather than from external circumstances or other people's opinions. You're not waiting for life to deliver happiness through some grand event or achievement. You're generating it yourself, moment by moment, from the raw material of whatever's in front of you. A conversation, a sunset, the ritual of making tea. You've learned that happiness isn't something you find or earn. It's something you practice, like a skill, like a language you speak fluently when everyone else is still learning the alphabet. There's a particular kind of freedom in this that's hard to explain to people who haven't felt it. It's the freedom of not needing life to be extraordinary, to feel alive, of not measuring your days by their highlights or their productivity or their social media potential, of understanding that a life well lived isn't always a life well documented. You've discovered what the world keeps forgetting, that richness isn't about abundance, it's about attention. But let's be honest about the shadow side, because pretending it's all peaceful would be a lie. Sometimes this preference for simple happiness comes from exhaustion, doesn't it? From being overwhelmed by a world that demands too much, takes too much, wants you to be too much. Sometimes choosing simplicity isn't enlightenment, it's self-protection, a retreat, not toward something beautiful, but away from something that hurt you. And that's okay. That's human. There are days when finding happiness in simple things feels less like wisdom and more like giving up. When you wonder if you're actually at peace or just afraid, afraid to want more, afraid to be disappointed again, afraid that if you reach for something bigger, it'll slip through your fingers like everything else that mattered. Sometimes the simple life isn't chosen, it's what's left after hope got too expensive. Sometimes you tell yourself you prefer quiet mornings alone because it's easier than admitting that loneliness has become familiar, almost comfortable in its predictability. And here's what nobody talks about. You can feel both at once, the genuine peace of a slow Sunday morning and the ache of wondering if you're missing something. The real satisfaction of a home-cooked meal and the small voice asking if you should want more excitement, more novelty, more of whatever it is that makes other people's lives look so full. This ambivalence doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're honest. It means you're human enough to contain contradictions, wise enough to let them coexist without resolution. Even when simple happiness comes from fear or protection or the bruises of past disappointments, it's still a form of care. It's your psyche saying, this is what we can handle right now. This is the pace at which we heal. This is how we rebuild trust with life itself, one small, manageable moment at a time. And maybe that's not the whole story forever, but it's a true story for now. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be exactly where you are, finding whatever joy is available, without apologizing for not being somewhere else. Finding happiness in simple things isn't absence of ambition, it's presence of mind. Choosing quiet Saturday mornings isn't isolation, it's intentional living. Being satisfied with what you have isn't settling, it's recognizing what actually matters before it's gone. The world has confused contentment with complacency, but they're not even cousins. One is giving up, the other is waking up. Think about someone who spent years chasing the next milestone, the next achievement, the next thing that was supposed to finally make them feel successful, worthy enough. They collected accomplishments like stamps in a passport, proof they were living, proof they mattered. But every peak felt flat within days, every victory hollow within weeks. The happiness had the lifespan of cut flowers. Then one day they stopped running, made dinner at home, sat on the porch as the sun went down, felt something they'd forgotten existed, not the spike of achievement, but the steady warmth of sufficiency, not the thrill of more, but the relief of enough. Research actually supports this, though you don't need studies to know what you've already felt. People who practice gratitude for ordinary experiences report higher life satisfaction than those constantly seeking novel pleasures. Those who develop what psychologists call savoring skills, the ability to fully appreciate positive moments, show greater emotional resilience and well-being. But here's what makes it beautiful. When you stop needing life to be extraordinary, you start noticing how extraordinary it already is. The shift isn't in circumstances, it's in perception. You're not seeing different things, you're seeing things differently. This is about congruence, alignment between what you value and how you live. It's the quiet integrity of a life that doesn't need to prove itself to anyone, including you. You're not performing happiness or collecting moments to display later. You're just there, fully there, for the felt experience of your own existence. The rest of the world might not understand, might call it boring or basic or not enough. But they're measuring with the wrong ruler, counting what can be counted and missing what can only be felt. You've learned to trust your own experience of joy over someone else's definition of it. That's not simplicity, that's revolution. Perfeito. Aqui estão os 5 capítulos finais. There's a specific vocabulary that might help you explain this to people who don't understand, who worry you've lost your spark or settled for less. You can say, I haven't stopped wanting things. I've started wanting different things. I haven't given up on joy. I've just found it in places the world taught me not to look. This isn't about closing yourself off from experience. It's about being selective with your attention, protective of your peace, intentional about what gets access to your inner world. You can tell them, I love people, I love connection, I love adventure. I just don't need them to be constant or loud or documented to feel real. I need space between experiences to actually metabolize them, to let them settle into memory instead of immediately chasing the next one. I need time alone, not because I'm avoiding life, but because that's where I process it, where I integrate it, where I figure out what it meant and who I'm becoming because of it. This is self-knowledge, not self-isolation. This is discernment, not disconnection. The world has confused quantity with quality, speed with depth, visibility with meaning. But you've learned that more isn't always better. Sometimes it's just more noise. You've discovered that the most nourishing experiences often happen in the margins everyone else ignores. The morning before anyone needs you, the evening after obligations end, the in-between moments that don't photograph well but feel like home. You're not missing out. You're paying attention to what others are too distracted to notice. This is what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, doing things for their own sake rather than for external reward. Reading because the story moves you, not to hit a yearly goal. Cooking because the process centers you, not to post the result. Walking because it clears your head, not to track your steps. You've reclaimed your experiences from the tyranny of metrics and audience. You've remembered that life is meant to be lived, not optimized, not performed, not justified to anyone who's confused your depth for simplicity. Here's the truth they don't put in self-help books. Sometimes simplicity chooses you before you choose it. Sometimes life strips away the excess until you're left with only what's essential, and you discover that the essential is enough, more than enough. That everything you thought you needed was just armor, distraction, a way to avoid feeling the full weight of being alive. And when the armor falls away, through loss or exhaustion or just getting tired of pretending, what remains is surprising. Not the emptiness you feared, something quieter, something true. Maybe you learned this the hard way. Maybe you had everything the world said would make you happy and felt hollow anyway. Or maybe you never had those things and stopped believing they'd save you if you did. Either way, you arrived here, at this understanding that happiness doesn't scale with acquisition, that joy doesn't compound with complexity, that the best moments of your life have almost never been the most impressive ones. The best moments were ordinary until you were present enough to feel them, and then they became everything. Not everyone gets here. Some people spend their whole lives chasing, accumulating, upgrading, never stopping long enough to ask what they're running toward or away from. There's no judgment in that. We're all doing our best with the programming we received. But you've done something different. You've questioned the programming. You've looked at the script you were handed, the one that says more is always better, that contentment is for people who've given up, and you've put it down. You've written your own definition of a life well lived, and maybe it looks small from the outside. Maybe it wouldn't make a good movie or an inspiring TikTok or a story people tell at parties. But from the inside it feels like freedom, like coming home to yourself after years of being a stranger in your own life. Like finally understanding that you don't need permission to be satisfied, that you don't owe anyone an explanation for finding beauty where they see nothing. The smallness isn't a limitation, it's a lens. And through that lens, everything becomes luminous. Nem toda abundância é riqueza. Sometimes the fullest life is the one with space to breathe in it. Sometimes sophistication looks like simplicity until you're close enough to see the intention behind every choice, the awareness in every gesture, the depth in every ordinary moment transformed by full presence. The world will keep shouting that you need more stuff, more status, more proof that you exist, but you've learned to whisper back, I have enough, I am enough. This moment, exactly as it is enough. There's a particular kind of wealth in waking up grateful for what's already here, in feeling rich because the coffee is hot and the morning is quiet and you have nowhere to be but exactly where you are. The world measures wealth in zeros and commas, in square footage and follower counts, but you've discovered a different currency, attention, presence, the ability to be moved by what you already have instead of haunted by what you don't. That's not poverty. That's abundance the rest of the world is too busy to recognize. People who seek happiness in simple things haven't lowered their standards. They've raised their awareness. They haven't settled, they've arrived. They've stopped postponing contentment until some future achievement and started experiencing it now, in the texture of regular days, in the reliable comfort of rituals, in the steady satisfaction of a life aligned with their actual values instead of borrowed ones. They've learned what monks and poets have always known, that everything you're looking for is already here, hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to slow down enough to see it. This isn't the end of wanting. It's the beginning of wanting what actually nourishes you. Not the hollow calories of comparison and consumption, but the sustaining nutrition of genuine experience. You still want things. You want the feeling of sun on your skin, the sound of someone you love laughing, the satisfaction of making something with your hands, the peace of a day with no agenda but your own gentle unfolding. These wants are immediate, embodied, impossible to monetize. They require nothing but your willingness to receive them. And maybe that's why the world doesn't value them, because there's no profit in teaching people they already have everything they need. There's a question worth sitting with, even if you never answer it out loud. What part of you has the world never understood, but that, in quiet moments, you've learned to protect and honor? What small joy have you defended against the voices that said it wasn't enough? What simple pleasure have you returned to again and again because it feels like home in a way nothing else does? These questions don't need answers for anyone but you. They're just invitations to notice what you've already built, a life that might look ordinary but feels like exactly yours. Maybe it's the way you take your tea in the same cup every morning, the small ceremony of it. Maybe it's how you read the same book every few years because it changes with you, shows you who you're becoming. Maybe it's Saturday afternoons with nothing planned, the luxury of unscheduled hours, the permission to simply be instead of constantly do. Whatever it is, it's not nothing. It's the architecture of your contentment, the foundation of your peace. It's what you return to when everything else is chaos. It's home. The world will keep trying to convince you that happiness lives somewhere else. In the next purchase, the next achievement, the next experience impressive enough to share. And sometimes you'll believe it. Sometimes you'll wonder if you're missing something, if you should want more, if your satisfaction with simple things is actually just fear dressed up as contentment. Those doubts are normal. They're the residue of a culture that profits from your dissatisfaction. You don't have to fight them, just notice them, acknowledge them, and return to what you know is true. That your happiness has never needed an audience to be real. Not every absence is emptiness. Sometimes it's the space where your soul remembers how to breathe. Sometimes choosing less is the only way to finally have enough. And maybe seeking happiness in simple things isn't about settling for a smaller life. Maybe it's about discovering how vast the present moment actually is when you're finally still enough to inhabit it. Maybe the simplicity was never the point. Maybe it was always about this: learning to be here, fully here, for your own brief and luminous existence. If this gave you words for something you've always felt but never knew how to explain, if it made you feel less strange for finding joy where others see nothing, then maybe you belong here. This is a place for people who've learned that depth doesn't require volume, that meaning doesn't need an audience, that a life well lived isn't always a life well documented. We talk about what the world never learned to value: the holy ordinary, the revolutionary simple, the profound everyday moments that hold more truth than all the highlight reels combined. Which part of your simple happiness have you learned to stop explaining? What small ritual keeps you sane in a world obsessed with more? You don't have to answer. Just know that whatever it is, it matters. Your contentment isn't a consolation prize. It's wisdom the world is too distracted to recognize. It's freedom wearing comfortable clothes. It's the quiet victory of actually living instead of performing life. So here's to the people who choose presence over proof, who find richness in repetition, beauty in the mundane, peace in the spaces between achievements. The world might never understand why you're satisfied with so little, but you know the secret. You're not satisfied with little. You're satisfied with everything, with the infinite contained in each ordinary moment, with the extraordinary hiding inside the simple, waiting for someone present enough to notice it. Stay gentle with yourself. Keep finding joy in what matters to you, even when it doesn't make sense to anyone else. Keep choosing depth over breadth, presence over performance, enough over more. The world needs people who remember that happiness doesn't have to be loud to be real, that sometimes the quietest lives are the fullest ones, that sometimes the smallest moments contain entire universes. You've learned to see them. That's not simple, that's sacred.